Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of history's most powerful, yet, well, invisible forces. We're talking about the secret weapon that shaped entire empires, long before tanks or satellites were even a dream, the unseen hand of the ancient spy.
When you picture ancient warfare, you probably think of clashing swords, brilliant generals, massive armies lined up on a field. But what if I told you the most decisive battles were often won before a single soldier even drew their sword?
That's right. The real game changer, the unseen hand that was steering victory and defeat, was information. Just knowing what your enemy was planning, where their weaknesses were, that was the ultimate weapon. So let's dive into how this hidden force really shaped the ancient world.
We'll kick things off by really trying to understand what intelligence even meant back then and how it fundamentally changed the outcome of some of history's most famous conflicts.
So what are we really talking about here? Ancient intelligence wasn't about fancy gadgets, of course. It was all about one thing: reducing uncertainty. For any commander, it was the critical difference between blindly marching your army into a catastrophic ambush and instead setting a brilliant trap of your own. It was quite literally the bedrock of all strategy.
Okay, so how did they get this game-changing information? Let's crack open the Ancient Spies toolkit and see what kind of tradecraft they were using thousands of years ago.
Right. So if intelligence is what you want, espionage is how you get it. It's the active, secret work of acquiring that information, that dangerous game of snatching secrets right from under your enemy's nose. And this whole game really boiled down to 4 key moves. First, you had good old-fashioned scouting, getting eyes on the enemy. Second, you had agents who would actually infiltrate cities and camps to gather secrets from the inside. Third, interrogating prisoners, a direct, though maybe not always reliable source of intel. And finally, the most clever tool of all, deception, where you're actively feeding the enemy bad information to mess with their plans.
Now you have to understand just how incredibly hard this was. There were no satellites, no encrypted radios, everything, and I mean everything, relied on people. A messenger on a horse could be captured, a report could take weeks to arrive, and by then the information was completely useless. So honestly, every piece of successful intelligence was kind of a minor miracle.
So let's see these methods in action. Our first case study, the epic clash between the Greeks and the massive Persian Empire. And this wasn't just a battle of armies, it was a battle between 2 completely different philosophies of intelligence. And what's so cool here is the contrast. On one hand, you have the Persians. They were organized, top-down, they had the famous royal road for fast communication, and this special group called the eyes and ears of the king. And the Greeks? They were the total opposite. Decentralized, relying on local know-how, their skills at sea, and, as we're about to see, an absolute genius for deception. And this just perfectly illustrates the risk. At Thermopylae, the Spartans had this brilliant plan to use the terrain to their advantage. But their entire defense was shattered by one piece of human intelligence. A local traitor, a guy named Ephialtes, who showed the Persians a secret path around the mountains. For the Greeks, it was a catastrophic intelligence failure.
But the Greeks learned from their mistakes. At the Battle of Salamis, they were facing a Persian fleet that was just gigantic, way bigger than theirs. Their only hope was this incredibly high-risk plan: trick the Persians into fighting in a narrow channel where all those extra ships would just get in each other's way.
And this was the masterstroke. The Greek commander, Themistocles, sent a fake message to the Persian king Xerxes. He played right into Xerxes' ego, telling him exactly what he wanted to hear, that the Greeks were terrified and they were about to run away.
And just look at these numbers for a second. The Persians had at least a 2-to-1 advantage. I mean, this plan was unbelievably risky. Absolutely everything was riding on Xerxes believing that one single piece of fake news.
And Xerxes totally took the bait. He sent his fleet charging into the trap. His massive ships got clogged up in the narrow straits and were picked apart by the smaller, more nimble Greek ships. It was just a stunning victory, not of military might, but of pure information warfare.
All right, now let's jump forward a bit to an empire that turned intelligence from an occasional art form into a systematic machine: Rome. They didn't just win battles with information, they built and maintained an entire empire with it.
So early on, the Romans used that classic toolkit we've already talked about. They had their military scouts, the speculatores. They were masters at interrogating prisoners, and they were really good at using local guides and informants, especially when laying siege to a city. But as their territory just kept expanding and expanding all across the Mediterranean, that just wasn't enough anymore. To manage an empire that vast, that complex, they needed a whole new kind of soldier. Yeah, a soldier whose main weapon wasn't a sword, but a secret report, whose battlefield wasn't some open field, but the whisper networks in a rebellious province.
And here they are, the Frumentarii. Their origin story is just amazing. They didn't start out as spies at all. They were grain collectors. Their official job took them to every single corner of the empire, which, as it turns out, made them the perfect covert network. They could travel anywhere, ask questions, observe things, all without raising any suspicion. And over time, they became Rome's first real secret service, the eyes and ears of the emperor himself.
And nobody used this system better than someone like Julius Caesar. His conquest of Gaul wasn't just one with brute force. It was an absolute masterclass in intelligence. He meticulously used spies and informants to map out the complicated web of tribal politics, and then he used that information to turn the tribes against each other. It was the ultimate expression of Rome's information warfare.
So after looking at the Greeks and the Romans, what's the big takeaway here? Why does studying these ancient spies still matter to us today?
Well, the lesson that lasts is this. The technology changes, but the fundamental principle doesn't. It doesn't matter if it's a scout on horseback or a satellite in orbit. The ability to get better information than your opponent and then use it to shape events has always been, and will always be, the ultimate source of power.
Which kind of brings us to our final thought. I mean, we live in this age of unbelievable technology, right? Satellites, cyber warfare, the whole shebang. But at its heart, is intelligence still about understanding what makes people tick, exploiting their biases, and dealing with the constant threat of betrayal? Are the ghosts of that traitor Ephialtes and the cunning Themistocles still very much with us today? It's something to think about.